Daniel Harper sat in the massive council chamber and tried not to show his anger. The Vrexian ambassador was laughing at him again. This happened almost every week now, and Daniel was tired of it. Very tired. The alien looked like a giant lizard with too many teeth. His name was Krell, and he seemed to enjoy making humans look weak. Right now he was telling the entire Galactic Council that Earth's latest peace proposal was worthless. He used words that the translator made sound polite, but everyone knew what he really meant. Humans were weak. Humans were stupid. Humans should just accept whatever the stronger species decided to do to them. Daniel kept his face calm, but his hands were shaking. He gripped the edge of his podium harder. Behind him, Lieutenant Sophie Brennan touched his shoulder gently. She was reminding him to stay calm. They had practiced this many times. Smile, nod, be polite, never show anger. That was the job of a human diplomat in the Galactic Council. This was the 47th time this year that another species had insulted humanity in this chamber. It was only July. Daniel did the math in his head without meaning to. That was almost 2 incidents every week. And these were just the public insults. The private ones, the attacks on human ships, the raids on human colonies. Those happened almost every day now. The council chamber was on a massive space station called Kelvin 9. It floated in neutral space, far from any homeworld. The chamber itself was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up and up like a stadium. Each species had their own section. The humans had the smallest section because Earth only had 1 vote. Species like the Vrexians had 7 votes because they controlled 7 different worlds. The rules said that every world got 1 vote. The rules did not say anything about protecting worlds that could not fight back. Daniel finished his presentation and sat down. The council voted. His proposal lost like always. The vote was 143 against 1 for. Earth was alone, like always. Back on Earth, in a building that overlooked the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Gregory Mason was reading reports. He sat at a desk that was covered with papers and data screens. Every report said the same thing. The attacks were getting worse. What started as small raids on mining stations had grown into something much more dangerous. Now they were attacking human trade ships. They were attacking civilian transports. People were dying. Admiral Mason was an old man who had spent his whole life in Earth's military. He had gray hair and a face full of wrinkles. His uniform was perfectly clean, but his eyes were tired. He had been reading these reports for 5 years now. Every year the attacks got worse. Every year the council did nothing. Every year, Earth's diplomats asked for help and got nothing but laughter. Captain Nicole Brady stood in front of his desk. She commanded a ship called the Defender, one of Earth's largest warships. She was young for a captain, only 35, but she was good at her job. Right now her face showed the same frustration that Mason felt. "How much longer do we smile and nod?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but angry. "They are killing our people, sir. When do we stop asking permission to defend ourselves?" Mason looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to give her an answer that would make sense. He wanted to tell her that the politicians had a plan, that diplomacy would work eventually, that patience was the right choice. But he could not say any of those things because he did not believe them anymore. Until the politicians say otherwise, he finally answered. His voice was flat and emotionless, the voice of a soldier who had learned to follow orders even when those orders made no sense. But things were about to change. In Geneva, Switzerland, in a building that had seen centuries of human history, President Helen Carter was holding an emergency meeting. The room was full of the most important people in Earth's government: military generals, intelligence directors, scientists, diplomats. They all sat around a long table and watched the screens on the wall. The screens showed the wreckage of a ship. Not a military ship. A civilian transport called the New Horizon. It had been carrying 400 people to a new colony world. Families, children, scientists, farmers. Regular people looking for a new start on a distant planet. Vrexian raiders had destroyed the ship 2 days ago. The attack happened in neutral space, far from any military protection. The raiders had broadcast their attack on open channels like they were proud of it. Like killing 400 unarmed humans was something to celebrate. There were no survivors. The ship had been destroyed so completely that rescue teams could barely identify the debris. 400 people were just gone, turned into atoms floating in the dark. President Carter was a woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had been a diplomat before becoming president. She believed in peace. She believed in negotiation. She believed that talking was always better than fighting, but as she looked at the images of the destroyed ship, something changed in her eyes. They became cold and hard like steel. "We have tried diplomacy," she said quietly. The room was so silent that everyone could hear her clearly, even though she was barely speaking above a whisper. "We have tried sanctions. We have tried appeals and negotiations and compromises. We have absorbed their insults. We have endured their attacks. We have buried our dead and asked politely for it to stop, and they mistake our civility for weakness." She turned to look at General Kevin Walsh, the head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command. He was a large man with a square jaw and hands that looked like they could crush steel. "Initiate Protocol Grey Dawn," she said, quietly. "No announcements, no press releases, no warnings to the Council. Just do it." General Walsh nodded once. "Yes, Madam President." "And tell Ambassador Harper to deliver one final warning to the Council," Carter continued. "Make it clear. Make it simple. Make it official. And if they ignore it?" Walsh asked, though he already knew the answer. President Carter's expression did not change. Her voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that had been sleeping for a long time, something that was waking up. Then we stopped pretending to be polite. The meeting ended. Orders went out through encrypted channels. Deep in hidden bases on Mars and in the asteroid belt, ships that had been secret for decades began to wake up. Weapon systems came online. Crews reported to stations they had trained for but never expected to use. Earth's military, which the galaxy thought was small and weak and barely worth noticing, began to move. And in the council chamber on Kelvin 9, Daniel Harper received a message from Earth. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Then he smiled for the first time in months. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was not polite or friendly or gentle. It was the smile of a man who had been holding back for far too long and had finally been given permission to speak his mind. Sophie saw the smile and felt a chill run down her back. "What did they say?" she asked. "They said to give them one last warning," Daniel answered. "And they said I do not have to be nice about it anymore." The galaxy was about to learn something about humans that they should have known all along. Patience is not the same thing as weakness. Diplomacy is not the same thing as fear. And silence is not the same thing as acceptance. Sometimes, silence is just the sound of someone deciding how to respond. And when that someone is an entire species that has been holding back for 30 years, the response is going to be loud. Daniel Harper walked into the council chamber knowing that everything was about to change. He carried a small data tablet in his hand. The information on that tablet was going to make a lot of aliens very angry. Good. He wanted them angry. He was done being the punching bag of the galaxy. The chamber was noisy as usual. Delegates from dozens of different species were talking amongst themselves. Most of them were not even pretending to pay attention to the human section. Ambassador Krell was lounging in his seat like he owned the place. His mandibles were clicking together in a pattern that Daniel had learned meant amusement. The Vrexian found something funny. Probably the fact that a human was about to speak. Sophie stood beside Daniel. She looked nervous. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "Once you say what is on that tablet, there is no going back." "I know," Daniel replied. He felt surprisingly calm. For 5 years he had stood in this chamber and been polite. He had smiled when aliens insulted his species. He had nodded when they dismissed human concerns. He had used careful diplomatic language when what he really wanted to do was scream. But not today. Today, he was going to tell them the truth. And the truth was going to scare them. "Honored delegates," Daniel began. His voice was loud and clear. It carried through the chamber with a force that made several aliens look up in surprise. Usually the human spoke softly. Usually he was apologetic and gentle. Not today, but the chamber did not quiet down. Aliens kept talking. Some were still laughing. They had heard human speeches before. They knew how this worked. The human would complain. They would ignore him. Then they would vote down whatever proposal he made. It was almost routine by now. Daniel had expected this. He tapped the data tablet and suddenly the entire center of the chamber lit up with holographic images. The images were huge, impossible to ignore. They showed burning ships, destroyed colonies, bodies floating in the dark of space. Human bodies. Men, women, and children, frozen and broken in the void. The chamber fell silent. Even Krell stopped clicking his mandibles. For 32 years, humanity has pursued peace with this council, Daniel said. His voice was different now. It was hard and cold like metal. We have absorbed your insults. We have endured your violations of our territory. We have suffered your attacks on our ships and stations and colonies. We did this because we believed in the principle of galactic cooperation. We believed that reason would eventually prevail. We believed that if we were patient and diplomatic and civilized, you would eventually treat us with the same respect. He paused and let the images change. Now they showed the wreckage of the New Horizon, the civilian transport that had been carrying 400 colonists, the ship that Vrexian raiders had destroyed for sport. The images showed children's toys floating in the debris, a stuffed animal, a small shoe, things that had belonged to families who just wanted to start a new life. We were wrong, Daniel continued. You did not see our patience as wisdom. You saw it as weakness. You did not see our diplomacy as civilization. You saw it as fear. You attacked us again and again because you thought we could not fight back. You thought we would not fight back. More human weakness, Krell interrupted. He stood up from his seat, towering over his section of the chamber. His voice was full of contempt. You speak brave words, but what can you do? Your fleet is small. Your weapons are outdated. You have no allies. You have nothing but words. Several other delegates made sounds of agreement, clicking, chirping, hissing, the universal language of species that thought they were superior. Daniel did not look away from Krell. He met the alien's eyes without flinching. We let you believe that, he said quietly. It was easier than the alternative, but you made a mistake. You attacked the New Horizon. You killed 400 civilians. You killed children, and you forced our hand. He tapped the tablet again. The holographic images changed to show a simple message. It was written in every known galactic language. The message filled the entire center of the chamber, impossible to miss. Cease all hostile actions against human interests immediately. You have 72 hours to comply. This is your only warning, the chamber erupted. Aliens were shouting, laughing, making sounds of disbelief. The idea that humanity was giving them an ultimatum was apparently the funniest thing they had heard in years. Krell's laughter was the loudest. It echoed through the chamber like broken glass, or what? Krell demanded, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of mock fear. You will file another protest? Send another strongly worded letter? Deploy your tiny fleet to shake their weapons at us? Please, human, tell us what you will do if we ignore your pathetic warning. Daniel gathered his tablet and his papers. Sophie moved to follow him. They walked toward the exit together. The chamber was still filled with laughter and mocking sounds. It was so loud that Daniel had to raise his voice for everyone to hear his final words, or we stopped being polite. The words hung in the air for just a moment before another wave of laughter drowned them out. Daniel and Sophie walked out of the chamber. The massive doors closed behind them with a heavy boom that seemed final somehow. In the corridor outside, Sophie let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Do you think they will listen? She asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Daniel replied. He was smiling again. That cold, hard smile. And High Command is counting on that. The countdown began. 72 hours. 3 days. Earth waited. The Galactic Council waited. But they were waiting for different things. The Council was waiting for nothing to happen. They expected the ultimatum to pass without consequence. They expected humanity to back down like always. They expected the humans to realize their place in the galactic order. Earth was waiting for the Council to make the wrong choice. And preparing for what would happen when they did. 71 hours and 37 minutes after Daniel delivered the warning, a Vrexian battle group jumped into the Proxima Centauri system. Their target was a human medical station orbiting the fourth planet. The station was small, barely armed, and staffed mostly by doctors and nurses. It was a perfect target for the Vrexians. Easy, defenseless, human. The Vrexian commander, a warrior named Drac, was proud of his assignment. He was going to show these weak humans what happened when they threatened the Vrexian Empire. He was going to destroy their medical station and broadcast the attack across all military channels. He was going to make sure every species in the galaxy saw how powerless humanity really was. Drac's battle group consisted of 8 warships. Heavy cruisers with thick armor and powerful weapons. More than enough firepower to obliterate a small medical station. Drac opened a channel to all nearby space. He wanted everyone to see this. He wanted the humans to know that their ultimatum was meaningless. "Attention, human medical station," Drac announced. His voice was full of confidence and contempt. "You have 30 seconds to evacuate. Then we will demonstrate what happens when your species forgets its place in the galactic order." He waited. The medical station did not respond. Good. They were probably running around in panic trying to get to escape pods. Drac enjoyed imagining their fear. 30 seconds passed. He gave the order to fire. His weapons officer pressed the firing controls. Nothing happened. More precisely, the weapons fired, but they never reached the target. Something intercepted them. All of them. Every missile, every plasma bolt, every kinetic round. They just vanished, destroyed in flight by weapons that Drac's sensors could not track. What just happened? Drac demanded. His crew was frantically checking their systems. Everything seemed to be working correctly. The weapons had fired. The targeting was accurate. But something had stopped them. Something impossibly fast and impossibly precise. "Sir," his sensor officer said. Her voice was shaking. "Contact." Multiple contacts. Emerging from stealth, right on top of us, Drac looked at his main screen. At first he saw nothing. Then, one by one, ships appeared. Human ships. They had been there the whole time, hiding behind some kind of stealth technology that Vrexian sensors could not detect. And they were close. Terrifyingly close. Close enough that Drac could see the weapons ports opening on their hulls. There were 12 human ships. They were smaller than his cruisers, but something about them made Drac's instincts scream danger. They moved wrong. They accelerated in ways that should not be possible. They positioned themselves around his battle group with a precision that seemed almost choreographed. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke. It was calm and professional and absolutely cold. "Vrexian battle group, you were warned. You have violated the 72-hour grace period. You have attempted to attack a medical facility. You have 15 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender." Drac laughed. He could not help it. 12 small ships against his 8 heavy cruisers? The humans were insane. "Surrender? To you, open fire. Destroy them all." His fleet fired everything they had. The space between the ships lit up with weapons fire. Enough destructive power to level a city, enough to crack a small moon. All of it aimed at 12 human ships. But the human ships were not there anymore. They moved, faster than anything Drac had ever seen. They dodged and weaved and accelerated in impossible directions. His weapons fire missed. All of it missed. Every single shot. The war began with silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of something enormous holding its breath before striking. Admiral Gregory Mason stood on the bridge of the UESF Valiant and watched the stars. The bridge was quiet. Every crew member was at their station, waiting. They had been waiting for 30 years. Now the waiting was over. Mason touched a control on his command chair. "All ships," he said quietly. "Execute Phase 1. Let them see what we have been building. Around Earth, around Mars, around every human colony and station and outpost, something impossible happened." Ships appeared. Hundreds of them. They had been hiding behind stealth technology so advanced that the galaxy did not even know it was possible. They had been there for years, silent and invisible, waiting for this exact moment. 300 warships uncloaked simultaneously. Their hulls were dark and sleek, covered in armor that seemed to drink in light. Weapons ports opened along their sides like eyes opening after a long sleep. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, built in secret shipyards where no alien inspector could see. Built with technology that humanity had been developing quietly, while the galaxy laughed at them. The Galactic Council had thought humans were weak because their visible fleet was small. They had not realized that what they could see was only what humans wanted them to see. While diplomats absorbed insults in council chambers, while captains endured raids with outdated ships, engineers and scientists had been working. Every attack endured had bought time. Every insult absorbed had bought secrecy. Every year of patience had bought preparation. Now the bill was due and humanity was collecting. Captain Nicole Brady sat in the command chair of the UESF Defender and felt her ship hum with power. Around her, 5 more ships of her strike group moved in perfect formation. They were headed for the Vrexian border. toward a sector where Vrexian raiders had been launching attacks on human trade ships for the past 3 years. The raiders thought they were safe. They thought humans could not reach them. They were about to learn otherwise. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said. Lieutenant Ryan Peters was young but sharp. He had been training for this moment since he joined the fleet. "Weapons are hot. Shields are at maximum. Stealth systems are engaged." Nicole nodded. She opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, listen up. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to take territory. We are here to send a message. That message is simple. Leave us alone or this continues. Make it clear." Her ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vrexian defensive zone. Immediately, alarms started blaring on Vrexian ships. They had detected the human fleet. Good. Nicole wanted them to know what was coming. The Vrexian defensive fleet consisted of 40 ships. Heavy warships built for slugging matches, designed to absorb damage and dish it out in overwhelming firepower. They outnumbered Nicole's strike group almost 7-1. In a traditional battle, the Vrexians would have won easily. But this was not going to be a traditional battle. The Vrexian commander opened a channel. His voice was full of arrogance. "6 human ships dare to challenge the Vrexian defense fleet? Your species has gone insane. Power down and surrender, and we might let you live." Nicole did not bother responding with words. Instead, she gave a single order: weapons free. What happened next would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human ships moved like nothing the Vrexians had ever encountered. Where Vrexian ships were designed for straight-line charges and broadside exchanges, human ships danced. They had been designed by engineers who understood atmospheric fighter combat, translated into 3-dimensional space warfare. They spun and rolled and dove in patterns that seemed random, but were actually precisely calculated. The Vrexians fired first. Massive plasma cannons that could melt through armor, missile swarms that could overwhelm point defense, kinetic weapons that hit like small asteroids. They fired everything they had at the 6 human ships. And they missed. Every shot missed. The human ships were simply not where the Vrexians expected them to be. Then the humans fired back. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles punched through Vrexian shields like they were not even there. Missile swarms equipped with true artificial intelligence guidance systems could not be fooled by countermeasures or confused by jamming. And the energy weapons, pulse lasers powered by miniaturized fusion reactors, cut through armor with surgical precision. The first Vrexian ship died in less than 20 seconds. Its shields collapsed under sustained fire from 3 different human ships. Then its armor failed. Then its reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a small star being born and dying in the same instant. The second ship lasted 30 seconds. The third managed almost a minute, but only because the human ships were busy with other targets. One by one, the Vrexian defensive fleet was dismantled. Not destroyed in glorious combat. Not defeated in heroic last stands. Just methodically, efficiently, clinically taken apart by ships that were faster, smarter, and better armed than anything the Vrexians had. 40 ships. The entire defensive fleet of a major Vrexian sector, gone in 47 minutes. The human strike group had not lost a single ship. They had not even taken serious damage. Their shields had barely been touched. When it was over, Nicole opened a channel on all Vrexian frequencies. She wanted every Vrexian ship, every Vrexian station, every Vrexian world to hear what she was about to say. "You were warned," she said. Her voice was calm and professional. There was no anger in it, no triumph, no emotion at all. Just a statement of fact. Withdraw from all human space immediately. Cease all hostile actions against human interests. Do this and we will stop. Refuse and this continues. We do not want your territory. We do not want your submission. We just want to be left alone. But if you force our hand, we will not stop until you understand this lesson. Choose wisely. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated itself. Wherever alien species had harassed humanity, human warships appeared. They struck with overwhelming force, destroyed military targets with precision, and then offered the same terms. Withdraw and cease hostilities or face complete destruction. The Torvan Collective, which had been seizing human mining operations in disputed territory, lost their entire border patrol fleet in a single afternoon. The human ships appeared, destroyed every military vessel in the sector, and then left without touching a single civilian station. The message was clear. This was not conquest. This was punishment. The Celtic Empire, which had been demanding tribute from human trade ships passing through their territory, watched as 3 of their major fleet bases were reduced to scrap. The human attack was so precise that the civilian sections of the bases were untouched. Only the military sections, the warships and weapons and soldiers, were destroyed. Again, the message was clear. Humans could have killed everyone. They chose not to. But they could if pushed. Species that had spent decades believing they were the dominant military powers in the galaxy watched in horror as their fleets were swept aside. Technology they thought was advanced turned out to be primitive. Tactics they thought were sophisticated turned out to be predictable. Weapons they thought were powerful turned out to be inadequate. And the humans, the species they had been mocking and attacking for 3 decades, turned out to be holding back the entire time. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, the Council was genuinely afraid. They had created rules and laws assuming they were the strongest. They had enforced those rules selectively, protecting the strong and ignoring the weak. They had believed their own propaganda about galactic order and civilization. Now a species they had dismissed as irrelevant was teaching them a harsh lesson about actual power. Admiral Mason stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched reports coming in from across human space. Every engagement was a victory. Every battle was one-sided. The fleet was performing beyond even his optimistic projections. Ships that had been built in secret for decades were proving their worth. Crews that had trained in hidden simulators were executing their missions flawlessly. But Mason did not feel triumphant. He felt old and tired and sad. This should not have been necessary. Humanity had tried peace. They had tried diplomacy. They had tried patience and restraint and every civilized option. The galaxy had responded with contempt and violence, so now humanity was responding the only way that seemed to work. With force. With overwhelming, undeniable, inescapable force. He opened a channel to Earth to the President herself. Phase 1 complete, Madam President. All objectives achieved. Minimal casualties on our side. Enemy forces in full retreat across all sectors. President Carter's face appeared on his screen. She looked as tired as he felt. Casualties on their side? Military only, Mason reported. We have been very careful to avoid civilian targets. This is about sending a message, not committing genocide. Good, Carter said. Any responses from the Council? They have called an emergency session. They are demanding we cease hostilities immediately. They are threatening sanctions and blockades. Carter smiled, but there was no humor in it. With what fleet? From what I am seeing, most of their military forces are running back. The council chamber on Kelvin 9 was in complete chaos. Delegates were shouting at each other in a dozen different languages. Some were demanding military action. Others were demanding surrender. A few were simply demanding to know how this had happened. How had the weak humans suddenly become the most dangerous species in the galaxy? Ambassador Krell sat in his seat and said nothing. His mandibles were still, his body motionless. For the first time in his long career, he was afraid. The Vrexian Empire had lost 40% of its military fleet in less than a week. 40%. Entire battle groups simply erased from existence. And the humans were not slowing down. They were not offering terms. They were just methodically destroying every Vrexian military asset they could find. The Torvan ambassador, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in rainbow patterns, was shrieking at the council speaker. They were hiding this capability all along. This is a violation of every treaty. They lied to us. They deceived us. Which treaty? Came a voice from the entrance. The entire chamber fell silent. Every delegate turned to look at the doors. Standing there was Daniel Harper. But he was different. He was not wearing his diplomatic robes anymore. Instead, he wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver trim. It looked almost military. Behind him stood Admiral Gregory Mason in full military dress. And behind the Admiral, 6 human Marines in combat armor stood at attention. Their rifles were held at rest position, but their presence was a clear message. Humans were no longer coming to the council as supplicants. They were coming as equals. Maybe more than equals. You are not authorized to bring weapons into this chamber. Ambassador Krell finally found his voice, but it shook when he spoke. He did not sound nearly as confident as he had a week ago. Daniel walked slowly down the central aisle toward the speaker's platform. His boots echoed in the silent chamber. "You are not authorized to wage war on civilians," he replied. His voice was calm but cold. "Yet here we are. Tell me, Ambassador Krell, where in your treaties does it say that raiders can target medical stations? Which clause covers the destruction of colony ships? Which article protects species that murder children?" Krell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. There was no answer because the Council had never bothered to enforce their own laws when humans were the victims. For decades, they had looked the other way. They had allowed the strong to prey on the weak because it was easier than challenging powerful species. They had created a system where might made right, and then they had been surprised when someone mightier appeared. Admiral Mason stepped forward and activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of known space. Red dots marked the locations of major military fleets, or rather where those fleets used to be. Most of the red dots were now gray, indicating destroyed or disabled forces. The remaining red dots were all clustered around their home systems, defensive postures that screamed fear. The Galactic Council has maintained order for 1,000 years through the threat of collective military action, Mason said. His voice carried through the chamber with absolute authority. But that threat is hollow when you allow, even encourage aggression against species you perceive as weak. You created this situation. You taught the galaxy that violence without consequence is acceptable. You established a precedent that the strong can abuse the weak. Congratulations. You succeeded, and now you have learned that humanity is not weak. We were simply patient. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species was one of the founders of the council, raised one of his many limbs for silence. We demand that you cease all hostilities immediately. We will impose sanctions. We will organize a blockade. We will— With what fleet? Mason interrupted. He was not being rude. He was genuinely asking. The holographic map showed the truth clearly. The combined military might of the Galactic Council was in full retreat. Some species had lost more than half their warships. Others had pulled everything back to defend their home worlds. There was no fleet capable of challenging humanity. Not anymore. The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Delegates were shouting, threatening, demanding. But underneath all the noise was fear. They had never felt powerless before. They had never been on the receiving end of overwhelming force. They had always been the ones in control, the ones making the rules, the ones deciding who lived and died. Now that position was reversed, and they did not like it at all. Daniel moved to the exact center of the chamber and activated his data tablet. The holographic display changed to show a document. A formal document, written in clear language with no diplomatic hedging. Humanity is not interested in conquest, Daniel said. We are not interested in your resources, your territory, or your submission. We came to the stars hoping for partnership, for cooperation, for friendship. You gave us contempt, you gave us violence. You gave us dead children, so here are Earth's terms. These terms are not negotiable. They are not subject to council vote. They are simple facts. You will comply, or we will continue our current operations until there is nothing left to negotiate with. The holographic document expanded so every delegate could read it clearly. Daniel read it aloud anyway, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. First, all species will withdraw from the neutral zones surrounding human space. These zones will be patrolled by human forces. Any vessel entering without prior authorization will be turned away. Once, a second violation will result in the destruction of that vessel. There will be no third warning. You cannot claim that much space, the Torvan ambassador protested. Those zones include valuable resources, trade routes, strategic positions. We are not claiming it, Daniel replied. We are establishing a buffer zone for our security. You proved you cannot be trusted to respect boundaries, so we are making boundaries you cannot cross without consequences. If you want access to those zones, you can apply for authorization through proper channels. We will consider each request. But the days of ships simply doing whatever they want in our space are over. He continued reading, second reparations. Every species that participated in attacks on human interests will provide compensation for damages and loss of life. We have detailed records. We know who attacked which ships, which stations, which colonies. Payment schedules will be provided. Failure to pay will result in seizure of assets. Krell stood up. His full height was impressive, nearly 3 meters tall. But his voice was not as strong as it used to be. The Vrexian Empire will never pay tribute to humans. We would rather. The Vrexian Empire has lost 40% of its military fleet, Mason stated flatly. You have three options. You can pay the reparations through normal economic means. You can have us seize equivalent value in resources from your outer territories, or you can continue fighting, in which case we will continue destroying your military until there is nothing left. Choose. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone understood the simple math. Humanity had demonstrated that they could destroy any fleet sent against them. They had done it repeatedly. They had done it without taking significant casualties. The military option was not really an option at all. It was just choosing how badly you wanted to lose, Daniel continued. Third, the Galactic Council will establish an actual enforcement mechanism for its laws. No more selective prosecution. No more turning a blind eye to atrocities because the victims lack military strength. No more allowing the powerful to prey on the weak. You will create a proper military force drawn from volunteers from all member species that answers to the Council as a whole rather than individual species. This force will enforce Council law fairly and equally. And if we refuse these terms? The Council speaker asked quietly. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but everyone heard him clearly. Then we stopped pretending altogether. You have seen us restrained. You have seen us diplomatic. You have seen us being polite even when you gave us every reason not to be. This past week you have seen us annoyed. We have destroyed military targets. We have avoided civilian casualties. We have offered terms and opportunities for peaceful resolution. Pray that you never see us truly angry. Pray that you never force us to stop holding back. Mason added, we can continue this current campaign indefinitely. Our ships are faster. Our weapons are stronger. Our technology is more advanced than you thought possible. We built all of this while you were laughing at us, while you were attacking our people, while you thought we were weak. Imagine what else we have been building. Imagine what other capabilities we have kept hidden. Do you really want to find out? The chamber was silent. Nobody had an answer to that. The human military had appeared seemingly from nowhere with technology that outclassed the entire galaxy. What else might they have? What other surprises were waiting? The delegates looked at each other and saw the same fear reflected back. Sophie stood at the edge of the chamber and watched the delegates. She had been Daniel's aide for 5 years. She had seen him insulted, dismissed, and laughed at more times than she could count. She had watched him maintain his composure through it all. Now she watched as those same delegates, those same species that had mocked humanity for decades, sat in silence and fear. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, 3 months had passed since Daniel Harper delivered Earth's terms to the Galactic Council. 3 months since the galaxy learned that humanity was not the weak species they had believed. 3 months, and the galaxy looked very different now. Captain Nicole Brady stood in the observation deck of Firebase Liberty and watched the steady flow of ships passing through the checkpoint. The Firebase was one of 12 massive defense stations that now orbited key positions around human space. Each station was large enough to be seen from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Each one carried enough firepower to fight off a major fleet. The message was clear. Human space was protected now. Anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it the hard way. Through the transparent wall, Nicole could see dozens of ships waiting to be processed. Human merchant vessels, yes, but also ships from other species. Vrexian cargo haulers, Torvan science vessels, even a few Celtic passenger liners. They were all waiting patiently for clearance to enter human space. Waiting politely, following the rules. Things had changed indeed. Lieutenant Ryan Peters joined her at the viewport. He carried a data pad showing the day's traffic reports. Interesting pattern in the applications, he said. We are getting more and more requests for trade agreements, not just from the species that used to attack us. We are getting applications from species we have never even met before. Word is spreading. Word about what? Nicole asked, though she already knew the answer. That humans keep their promises. That we treat our trading partners fairly. That we do not cheat or steal or suddenly decide we own something because we have bigger guns. Ryan smiled slightly. Apparently, that is unusual in galactic commerce. Who knew? Nicole smiled back. Who knew that treating people fairly would be good for business? Shocking. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter sat in the Oval Office and reviewed economic reports with her advisors. The news was surprisingly good. Better than good, actually. Within 2 months of the conflict ending, Half the species in the Galactic Council had approached Earth about trade negotiations. They wanted human technology. They wanted human-manufactured goods. They wanted access to human markets, and they were willing to pay fair prices for it. The irony is rich, Carter said, looking at the numbers. For 30 years, they exploited us economically. They imposed unfair tariffs. They seized our cargoes. They denied us access to their markets, and now they are lining up to trade with us on our terms. Her chief of staff, an older woman named Patricia Cole, nodded. Respect changes everything. When they thought we were weak, they saw us as victims to exploit. Now that they know we are strong, they see us as partners to cultivate. It is not friendship, but it is workable. And the military situation? Carter asked. General Kevin Walsh pulled up a strategic map. All quiet. We maintain active patrols along our borders. The fire-based network is operational. We have rotating battle groups on standby. But there have been no incidents. No probing attacks. No border violations. Everyone is being very polite. Because they know what happens if they are not. Carter said quietly. It was not a question. Yes, Madam President. The galaxy has learned that human patience has limits, and that crossing those limits has consequences. Carter leaned back in her chair. She looked older than she had 3 months ago. The weight of the decisions she had made showed in her face. Keep the fleet ready, she said finally. Trust has to be earned. They have a long way to go before we can truly trust them. But we can hope. We can always hope. On the space station Kelvin 9, in the chamber that had been renamed the Chamber of Equal Voices, Daniel Harper sat in the human delegation section and listened to a debate about mining rights in a disputed sector. The chamber looked different now. The seating had been rearranged so that no species sat higher than another. Every delegate had the same position, the same voting power, the same voice. It had taken weeks of negotiation, but the changes had been made. The old order was gone. The new order was still being formed. The debate was actually civil. Delegates were listening to each other. They were proposing compromises. They were acting like a real council instead of a gathering of bullies deciding how to divide up the week. It was almost refreshing. After the session ended, Daniel gathered his materials and prepared to leave. A shadow fell across his desk. He looked up to see Ambassador Krell standing there. The Vrexian looked different. Older somehow. Less imposing. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. May I speak with you? Krell asked. His translator made the words sound formal but genuine. Daniel gestured to the seat across from him. Of course, Krell sat down. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly he spoke. You could have destroyed us. My analysts have confirmed it. Your fleet could have jumped into Vrexian space and destroyed our worlds. You had the capability. You had the justification after what we did. Why did you not do it? Daniel considered his answer carefully. This was important. Not just for Krell, but for what it represented. Because that is not who we are, he said finally. We did not come to the stars to be conquerors. We did not build those ships because we wanted to dominate other species. We built them because we needed to defend ourselves. Because you and others like you gave us no choice. You mistake mercy for weakness, Krell said, and we had to correct that misunderstanding. Yes, Daniel agreed. But the goal was never destruction. The goal was always peaceful coexistence. You just made that very difficult by treating us like prey. We had to demonstrate that we were not weak. But once that demonstration was made, once you understood that we could not be exploited, we stopped. We did not pursue revenge. We did not seek to humiliate you beyond what was necessary. We just wanted you to understand the lesson. Krell's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought in his species. My people are learning that lesson. It is difficult. We have been a warrior culture for thousands of years. Strength was everything. Compassion was weakness. But now we see a species that is both strong and compassionate. It is confusing. It does not have to be, Daniel said. Strength and compassion are not opposites. True strength means having the power to hurt someone and choosing not to. True civilization means having the ability to destroy and choosing to build instead. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Perhaps, Krell said slowly, perhaps your species has much to teach us, if we are wise enough to learn. He stood up and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting that he had learned. Daniel shook it. The grip was firm but not aggressive, equal. respectful. It was a start. Later that evening, Sophie found Daniel in the station's observation gallery. He was staring out at the stars, lost in thought. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. Thinking about what comes next? Always, Daniel admitted. We won the war. Now we have to win the peace. That might actually be harder. Do you think it was worth it? The cost? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about the new horizon and all the ships destroyed before it. He thought about the people who died because the galaxy saw humanity as weak. Then he thought about the changes in the council chamber, the trade agreements being signed, the species that were starting to treat humans as equals instead of victims. The cost of action was high, he said slowly. But the cost of inaction would have been extinction. Eventually they would have pushed too far. Eventually they would have destroyed something we could not allow to be destroyed. Earth itself, maybe. And then we would have had to respond not just with force but with rage. What we did was controlled, measured. We hurt them, yes, but we did not destroy them. If we had waited longer, if we had let them push us past the point of reason, the response might have been much worse. Sophie nodded. I heard some delegates talking. They have a new name for us. They call us the sleeping giant. The species that seems harmless until awakened. Daniel smiled slightly. I heard that too. It is not a bad name. Let them remember it. Let them remember what happens when you wake the giant. Maybe that memory will keep the peace. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was adapting to its new reality. Species that had ruled through strength alone were learning that strength without wisdom was just brutality. Species that had exploited the weak were learning that today's victim might be tomorrow's power. The old balance of power was gone. A new balance was being born. On Earth, Admiral Mason stood in his office and looked at the uniform hanging on his wall. It was his formal dress uniform, the one he had worn to the council chamber. He would not need it anymore. His work was done. The fleet was secure. The borders were defended. Earth was safe. Tomorrow he would retire from the military. Next month he would take command of a very different kind of ship. The UESF Explorer, Earth's first deep space exploration vessel designed to travel beyond the mapped regions of the galaxy. No weapons, no armor, just engines and sensors and laboratories. A ship built for discovery instead of destruction. That was what humanity wanted to do. Explore, learn, build, dream. The military had been necessary. The demonstration of force had been necessary. But it was not who they were. It was just what they could do.